Yay, we're live. I am Sue Borison stepping in for Kamira. We're swapping. She's going to be on Thursday, so check her out on Thursday. And I'm thrilled to be here with Robin Hauser, who is the director and producer of cause-based films. I just love saying that at Finish Line Features, including Savvy, Women, Money, Freedom. And that's what we're going to focus on this morning. The film Savvy, which I will say I watched it. I started and agreed to watch it a little reluctantly because, like, how interesting is a film about money? And I was riveted, and changed, by the way. Like, watched this movie, saw myself in it so much more than I would have thought I would see myself in it, and with a lot of disappointment, and then made the list of how am I going to change. So first, let me thank you for the movie. And I want to start with the question, why do women seem to abdicate their role when it comes to finances in their family?
Well, first of all, Susan, thank you for having me on. And your reaction to the film is fabulous. That's what we were hoping, we did make it entertaining and informative, but it was important that we kept butts in seats, as they say. So the fact that you were riveted is exactly what we were after. And we chose our characters very intentionally. Well, that's the million-dollar question. Why do women abdicate financial decisions to the men in their lives? And you can say, okay, well, my grandmother did it because that was the custom back then. Women probably weren't the bread earners, and therefore they didn't get a lot of say in how money was spent or saved. And maybe, a little bit less true for our mothers. But this is the problem. Millennial women, more than any other generation, are abdicating financial decisions to somebody else. They are taking a back seat to their personal finances. And that's what is so shocking. This is not something that's getting better. It's getting worse. So the whole reason I wanted to make this film was to dig deep and try to figure out, why is that? What's happening here? Is it because of sort of cultural boundaries? Is it that we just feel sort of innately that men are better at math, that men are better at finance? Is it because the financial world is made by men for men and not necessarily intentionally to marginalize women? But let's, be honest. When you talk about the stock market and investing, there are a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of jargon, that's sort of war-like analogies that aren't necessarily that becoming to women. Right? They tend to make women feel like they don't belong. So all of these are reasons that, and then maybe there's a sort of weird biological thing that women just want to be taken care of to a certain extent, right? And so if we're dividing things in the household, if we're dividing labor and women are handling the school and the kids and the volunteer work and their own careers, fine, you handle the money. So these are all things that contribute to this.
Okay, so that's a long list of the whys. And maybe I have 3 daughters. I look at what my marriage is modeling to them, and like, what should I do, and why should I do it for those girls and for all of our daughters?
Well, being a role model to our kids is incredibly important. And I would say to our daughters, but also our sons, so that when our sons develop relationships, they want to be transparent and open, especially if they've chosen to be with a woman, with the women in their with the woman in their life, right? So that if they end up in a heterosexual relationship, they feel comfortable, like it's natural to talk with their spouse about savings and about investing and about how much debt they're carrying, about all of it, right? Because it really should be a conversation. And let's talk about the most important things, which is why. There are people out there probably saying, you know what? My husband works in finance. He's better at it than I am. It's just fine with me. He's going to handle it. Well, this is why. You could suddenly end up widowed. And then do you know who has the mortgage? Do you know where your savings are? Do you know who your investment counselor is? Do you know how much you have to live without his salary, right? These are really important questions. Maybe you end up divorced. You weren't expecting to, but maybe that's what happens in your life. Same thing. suddenly you are solely responsible for your financial well-being, and you need to know how to manage these things. Women earn less than men because of the pay gap. We spend less time in the workplace because we care for the elderly, our parents, and also our kids. So we end up with, and we live longer, right? We live on average 7 years longer than men. So because of this, we have more life to live with less savings. And that's a scary thing. The statistics that show that women 65 and older, a much higher percentage of women 65 and older live in poverty than men who are 65 and older. And that's a problem.
And you think getting involved younger gives you more financial literacy so that what?
Oh, I mean, I think that, first of all, the system's got to change. We have to teach relevant financial literacy in schools. And relevant means you don't want to teach third graders about compounding interest, right? Save that maybe for high school. But you want people from a young age to understand, what are taxes? You know, when you earn, funny story, my dad, when I was 10 years old, I came home and I was so proud of myself because I had earned $10 babysitting. And my father said, great, well, let's sit down and talk about this. So he gave me 10 ones for the $10 bill that I had. And he said, okay, well, we're going to take $1 and put that aside. That's what you have to pay in taxes. You probably should have taken, $4 for that by the time $1. And he said, okay, and then you're going to pay this, how much is sort of was expenses, room and board. I'm like, Dad, I'm 10, I live at home. And then he took another $1 and said, this is what you should put into savings. And this is $1 for charity. You should give back because you're privileged, and you should give back. So I was left with like $5, right? And he said, go ahead and spend this. But it was such a valuable lesson because I learned immediately the value of like working and the expectations of, what it's really like to earn money in this world. So I think that there are lessons like that. Now, not everybody is lucky to have a father who's an financial advisor. And in that case, we need to learn it from school. Because what we've learned is then when kids learn from school, they go home and teach their parents. And that's really valuable, right? We need to learn about credit cards. How does debt work? How does credit work? In the United States, credit's one of the most important things. You can't even rent an apartment without good credit.
So can we go into one of the stories? Because one of the really moving stories, which if our kids are college bound, they get to college and there's a booth set up to get credit cards. And so you shared the story of a woman, I think at Brown, on a free ride who sees the booth, gets lured to the booth, and what happens?
Yeah, and this happens so often. It's now illegal for banks to have that sort of presence right on campus. But all you have to do is walk across the street, and they might be there. But what happened was, credit cards companies saw this amazing opportunity to get kids credit cards and college kids credit cards, their first credit card. And in a lot of ways, that's also a benefit for the kids, right? They need to establish credit. They need to get a credit card. But there's not a follow-up with lessons about how to work this. So young Yaneli Espinal, who came from an immigrant family, very bright, gets a full ride scholarship to Brown University. There were still things that weren't included. She had to pay for her books. She had to pay for school supplies and things like that. And she was also sending money, working 3 jobs, sending money home to her parents. So when she walks out and there's a booth and they're giving away pizza and t-shirts and Frisbees, and they said, all you need to do is sign up for this credit card. She was like, what is this? And they said, well, you can have $5,000. She said, $5,000? She thought of it as free money, right? So she signs up for the credit card. And when she goes out to the mall and gets a backpack and gets a pair of Uggs and tries to look like the other kids, right? She wants to fit in. And what happens when the statement comes to her, it says, all you owe is $25. All you owe is $35. It wasn't telling her that about the balance, and it certainly didn't educate her or warn her about compounding interest and how much it was costing her. Well, she ended up with over $20,000 in debt as a student and as a college student, and took her a long time to pay that off. So again, is it the responsibility of these credit card companies to actually teach kids what having a credit card is all about, to teach them that there is something called interest. And if you don't pay the balance, the interest can be sometimes up as high as, 28%. I mean, we have to learn these things. It's important.
Yeah. All right. Well, in making this movie, what was the biggest surprise? Like, you went into it knowing some things personally and just understanding the world in a perfect lens. What was the biggest surprise that you didn't expect?
And there were a few. I would say number one, that it's not getting better, right? That millennials are abdicating financial decisions at a higher rate than any other generation. So that was really surprising to me. I was also really surprised to hear that women, because we earn less and everything, that we really do have a deficit. We have less money to live on, to retire on, if we're not careful. And then I learned something called the pink tax. And I was like, the pink tax, what's that? And it's the fact that women pay more for things. We pay more for things, not only because, maybe we need makeup and men don't, but here's an example. During the pandemic, my boyfriend told me he was going to go get a haircut. And I said, oh my God, do you think she'll do me too? We're going to sit outside on the porch. And he said, I'll text her and see. And she said, sure. So the two of us sat down, and first she did him, took 45 minutes, and then she did me, it took 45 minutes. But for me, it was $110. And for him, it was $65. And I'm like, wait a minute, it was the same amount of time. It wasn't any more complicated. Why did my haircut cost more? And when you look, this happens all the time. It's more expensive to dry clean a woman's blouse than it is a man's, nice shirt, right? And I'm talking about both dry clean and stuff. So there is something out there called the pink tax, which is that life is more expensive for women. Not even mentioning the things that is expected of us, right? Like, it's okay when a dude goes gray because they kind of look mature and great. But no, women, we're expected to look good and to look young and to keep ourselves up. So it's, especially if you're a public figure or something. So it's more expensive as a woman. It means that we really need to think about how we're going to save for the future.
Okay, so I'm listening to this right now, and I think for my own purposes and for my family's purpose, I should become financially literate. What are the top 3 things that we should all start with?
Number one, you need to know how much debt you have. So you need to start talking to your partner about money. And let's just assume right now that you're in a relationship. Then you need to find a way to talk to your spouse about money if your spouse is the one that handles the money. And if you're the one that's handling everything and your spouse is sort of taking the back seat, you need to bring that person in and say, let's actually talk about this together. It might be the case that many of let's just make an assumption about a heterosexual relationship. It might be the case that your partner has been trying to get you involved for a number of years to sit down and understand your finances, and you've been too busy with the kids, too busy with your job, or it just feels yucky, right? Because what we know is that money is just not really, it's a stressful topic for most of us. So you need to find a time and a way to communicate with your spouse or your partner that you want to have these discussions. You want transparency. You want to learn more about money. And I think this is about tact, timing, and tone, right? You do not want to make the person that's been handling the long-term financial decisions to feel defensive. You certainly don't want them to feel criticized. It's not like, hey, I have no idea why we don't have more savings. Like, I need to understand this. I need to take over. It's more, hey, let's sit down and talk about this together because I'd really love to understand more. If something happened to you and I had to handle this on my own, I'd like to know, where's the debt? How many mortgages do we have on our house? Who's the mortgage with? How much are we paying for that mortgage, right? How much are we putting away into savings? How much savings do we have? What is a 401k? All of these things are so important to sit down and talk about. So that would be number one. Yeah.
So number 1 is knowing your debt. Number 2 is having the conversation. Is there a third thing that would fall into everybody should know this?
Well, so I was going to say, I think that knowing your debt is part of that, having the conversation, right? So number 1 is talk to your spouse about money. Number 1. Number 2, establish your own bank account. Have your own bank account. If everything's just in one pot, do you really want to have to ask permission to go out and buy a dress or get a haircut or whatever? Even if you don't work, you're doing something to keep that household together, and you should have your own checking account. So I really believe, and Farnoosh Torabi talks about this in the film. She's a strong believer of my money, his money or her money, and our money. And I think that that's a really important thing too. So establish, and if you're young and if you're just getting into the workplace or you're thinking about having kids, I keep telling my daughter, keep a foot in the corporate world if you can. It's so important just to have a way to make your own money. It's really important. It's your freedom. It's your independence. It's your livelihood. So I think that's really important. Boy, third thing, try not to start talking about money. Talk about money with your girlfriends. Talk about money with your kids. It's taboo. It's going to make your female friends squirm. They hate it. But it's so important to do because men have this advantage. Men can talk about it at a cocktail party, on the golf course, wherever. Men can talk about money. Hey, I just invested in this super cool IPO and wow, it's up 30 times over earnings. Pretty awesome. Great. What about, oh yeah, check out this ETF. It was really great. Men can talk about this and it's comfortable. It's bravado. They learn about this. Oh, tell me about that ETF. This is something. Women would be they would look at me like, where did I come from, and be totally appalled and roll their eyes at me if I showed up at a whatever, women's gathering and started talking about money. It is culturally not acceptable. And that has got to change. Because when I became a single woman, I needed to know. I was like, wow, I need to start saving some money for my future. This is kind of scary. And, I'm 50 years old, so I have to start saving for my future a little bit later in life. And I had a hard time talking to some of my friends about it because they were uncomfortable sharing. My married friends especially. My single friends, they could talk to me about it. But my married friends weren't really willing to say, oh, well, here's a good financial advisor, and here's what we do, here's how much we put away. And because it's not culturally acceptable, right?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's so interesting. We talk about so many things, especially at your teen. We try to share everything, but money it's a weird space. It's like we haven't been given the basic language to be able to build off of as we grew up. We got sidelined in the story, and then there's no fluency along the way. There's no growth in the language.
Yeah. Sorry, Susan. I was just going to say, because there's one more really important thing.
Okay, we're at 4 now.
4. If you're 18, if you're young in that age, and you're making, it doesn't matter if you're bringing in, $20,000 a year or $120,000 a year. Start investing. Put something away. And I'm not talking about day trading. I'm not talking about putting money into risky stocks. I'm talking about ETFs, mutual funds, something that's secure. Put a little bit into it. With all these new apps, there are ways that you can, save and invest. You can buy slice shares through Schwab, but I really am a believer in ETFs. Just put a little bit of money away, 10% of money away every single month, because the exponential growth that you will get on that money through compounding interest, if you start now, it's exponential compared to what's going to happen if you wait even 10 years.
Okay, so tell us, like, I'm listening and I have no idea what you just said. It was Greek. Where do I go to get like a really, like, maybe 4th grade description of what those things mean and how I would go about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, you can get on NerdWallet, for example, or Napkin Finance, and they'll show you some, really, really fun explanations of what this all is. But the idea of investing is, these days, if you put money in a savings account, it's going to earn like 0.005%, right? It's going to earn nothing because interest rates are so low. And even if they go up, it's going to take a long time before your savings account is going to feel that. If you put money into, if you invest it, right? If you get into the stock market, and again, diversify, don't put everything into one stock, and you just let it grow. You just leave it there. You believe in, say, growth in energy, for example, or whatever you choose you want. And you can have you can get advice from this. You can call, Schwab or your financial advisor and ask them what you should be investing in. And you can put as little as $10 a month into something, but you can put as much as a couple $100, depending on what your bandwidth is. If you put that in now, it will begin to earn interest and earn interest and earn interest, and that compounds. So on the balance, every year it earns more interest, and that money will grow. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was fortunate that my father, when my child was born, my father put $5,000 into a strip couponed government bond. And he said, this is going to be for college. 18 years later, when my daughter was facing, her first year of college, that money, the $5,000 after 18 years in a bond, was worth, that one did particularly well, but that was worth over $60,000.
Wow.
Right? So this is what can happen if you think ahead and if you invest and if you need help with this, there are financial advisors out there that will help you for free.
Oh, that's amazing. For free. Okay, so I want to give a shout out to HFLA of Northeast Ohio. This is how I got to the movie. This is how I got to Robin. And they are having an event with Robin. I think the link is in there if you want to post it again for people. interestfree.org/events/savvy. And you can see the movie and then hear Robin on a panel discussion. So I'm going to be there, and I hope all of you will take a peek at that, because the movie itself is just really worth watching. I have two more questions for you, and then I know you're in a rush. But if I'm listening right now, and either my kids or my family in general is in crisis, something has happened. We all know how COVID opened a window into how fragile we're all living right now. You gave some examples in the movie of like things people do to make it easier for themselves when it feels like there's nowhere to turn, like you just created a disaster and you have no idea what to do. Can you give us some of those things that people can do?
You mean in terms of financially?
Yeah. Like one story was about consolidating debt.
Oh, sure.
And even like the idea that you can negotiate interest rates, like who ever heard of that?
Yeah, exactly. So let's just say you're in a situation and you have, over $20,000. It doesn't even matter whatever your capacity is, but of credit card debt. Or you also have student loan debts. And then you have a car loan. And you're really feeling like you're over your head in debt. This is something you have to get out from under, right? Susie Orman did write a really good book about, I think it's called Women and Money or Your Money Choices or something like that. But she's got a few different books that have these great payoff plans if you have huge loans that you need to just work through and pay off. But you can also consolidate. And I know that SoFi is a company that's working. A lot of young kids have been college-age kids or post-college kids have been working with SoFi to help consolidate debt. And you actually can. It works sometimes, not all the time, but you can call your credit card company and say, hey, I just noticed that I'm paying 23% APR and approved rate, and can you lower that for me? I need this to be lowered a little bit. I'm working to pay off the credit card. I need your help with this. And you'd be surprised. They're able to sometimes drop it just, a few percentages. So there are things that you can do. There are people out there to help you, trying to feel better and going out to the mall with that credit card is probably not the right thing to do. Paying off debt is a process, and it's something that you have to work really hard at. But you can also get a gig job. It's a great gig economy right now to help pay off these loans. But I really think that everyone, all of us, should work to get out from under debt. And I'm not talking about having, mortgage on your house or a car loan that you can easily, pay off. Interest rates are really low right now. So it does make sense in some ways to, borrow money if you're buying a house and maybe, use some of your capital to grow something in the stock market. That makes a little bit more sense. But all of this is something that a financial advisor can help you with. And so I think that that's one of the most important things that we all should all do.
I think one of the biggest surprises for me was the idea that there's a relationship here between you and the bank. I mean, it feels so anonymous. And to call up and say, can you work with me on this? I mean, I think it's fascinating. Like there's a person on the other end.
That's right. And you know what? If you're not finding that person on the other end, I suggest you find a different bank, because there are enough banks out there right now who are working on a personal level and who are able to, really sit down with you and talk you through this. And if you can only get to, a voice, computerized voice, automatic answering, or if you're just finding a teller and nobody can come out and actually sit down and help you, you might be at the wrong bank.
Okay, last question. What's the good news? Leave us with some good news here.
The good news is that it is so doable, and it is so exciting to be in charge of your own money. It's so exciting just to be knowledgeable about this, because it takes the mystery out of the whole thing. It is the most empowering feeling to just know what you've got and what you don't have, but to know, okay, we can manage that debt. And I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And hey, I'm in charge now. I'm in charge of my own money. So I know what I can spend. I know what I should probably wait for. I know how much savings I've got. I know how much my money's growing. It's so empowering. So every woman, every man, I just think that it's just an incredible feeling, and I am a big advocate for it.
Robin Hauser, director of Savvy, really, really excellent movie. And shout out to HFLA, who's having a program, and the link that you would sign up with is in the comments. Thank you to both of you. And Robin, thanks for making the film. It's really great. Thank you.
Susan, thanks for being such a great fan, and also